Welcome back to another episode of SuckcessFull, the podcast.
I'm one of your hosts, Blake, and joining me,
I'm one of your other hosts, Justin.
And this is the podcast all about the not-so-subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in pursuit of it. Let's not waste any more time and get right to the show. Before we get started, I have to ask, is it sunny out there today or is it still raining?
It is sunny today. It rained. So what it's been doing is around 4 or 5 o'clock is when it starts to just pour. And I think I told you yesterday, we have this lake pond thing at the center of our apartment complex. And it's slowly the edge of it getting closer and closer to the sidewalk. But it was cool because yesterday there were all these ducks and we have these really pretty ones that I've never seen before. They have bright orange, almost neon beak.
We have those, and they're like brownish feathers.
Yeah, they're real pretty.
But they're small,
I've never
right?
seen them. Yeah, they're real small and they have longer necks.
I've never seen them either until this year. This is one of those advantages to climate change because you get cool stuff sometimes.
Yeah, so it was interesting.
They're beautiful. Yeah, we started seeing them this year too. And it's so funny because we have the other ones here they're like some kind of Chinese duck. And they're the opposite. They're like a freaking dinosaur. It's the biggest duck you've ever seen. Huge.
Oh, wait, are they the ones that have it looks like a turkey on their beak? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, some of them.
Yeah, we have some of those.
But you know what I'm talking about? They're like dinosaurs, right?
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah, they don't look natural at all. They look uncomfortable. Yes, they just don't look like they should be there.
We have those. We had hawk yesterday and some crows, but then I don't know what they're called. I call them nose pokers. So they're the weirdest looking birds. So they're these little like pelican looking birds, but like much smaller, like a fourth of the size of a pelican. But instead of the pelican beak, it has this long, skinny, rounded nose, and they like stick their nose and they grab bugs out of the dirt. So I call them nose pokers because I don't know what they are.
Well, let me enlighten you. Since we live in the same kind of area, they're called ibis.
Ah, okay.
Yes, and they look very weird because they probably have, it just curves like this. It's very crazy. But they're usually totally white, right? Yeah, that's an ibis. They're a very weird bird because from a distance, it's almost like the way I analogy is like being in a bar. You look across the bar, you're like, man, that person's gorgeous. And you get closer, you're like, nope. It's kind of like that bird. Like at a certain distance, they're beautiful. And then you get closer and they've got like these kind of bloodshotty eyes. They look skittish. So I call them bar birds.
And they eat weird things, a lot of dead things.
Gross. Well, I saw it yesterday. I felt so bad because we have herons here. And
okay, we have those here too, yeah.
And, they're gigantic birds. They sit still and they hunt. And he went for this, I think it was a fish, whatever. But he caught two. I watched him actually catch two at the same time. And you could see he was like, doing his thing with his beak, whatever. And he swallowed one. And the other one's like, oh, phew, he just wanted one. You see the other one went right down. And it's like, you poor bastard.
It's kind of weird because their neck looks so long and skinny. You wouldn't think they'd be able to eat those things, but they do. It expands. It's kind of weird. Birds are
like
strange.
A snake.
Yeah, just like a snake.
Yeah, this isn't at all on topic today, but it kind of is in a weird way. I think they're fascinating. Like when I was in Africa, they have this bird called the secretariat bird. Someone can correct me out there. I think it's a secretary bird. Anyways, you see storks and they're gigantic, but it's like the biggest bird in Africa. It'll walk through the grass, but it's taller than the grass. So it's insane. Anyways, so you see these birds and they're just like walking like doom, like like you picture a dinosaur like this. And I'm sure they fly, but I never saw one fly. And they'll just eat a turtle whole. That's how big they are. Like,
whoa.
They're huge. Yes. I mean, gigantic birds. They're not pretty, but they just look awkward.
I like birds, but when it comes to things like ostriches and things, like, how they have those petting zoos and stuff where you can go feed things? We always avoided the ostriches because they're really mean and they try to peck you with their big, long necks. And it's just,
It's gross. And again, they're a bar bird. They look really pretty from a certain distance. And you get closer
and they're like bald.
And their hair, because, it's like from a distance, you're like, oh, it looks okay. And you get closer and you can see individual follicles. But again, at a certain distance, very majestic, very pretty. And then you get closer, you're like, some work needs to be done here. I don't know how we got on the subject, but this is definitely entertaining. So, Blake, how are you today?
I'm doing good. There's a lot of change happening, though, because my best friend in the world is leaving today or left this morning. He got a job up north, and that kind of ties into everything we're going to be talking about. Oh, I came up with a title, by the way. I thought it was funny. It's the art of everything in between.
Woo! Just for all you people out, the audience out there, I want to let you know that she must have had just a little bit of Coke, some caffeine, and definitely a coffee, because that is very poetic and wonderful. That is on point. High five to you.
High five.
That's badass. I can't top that, damn it, Blake. All right, so I didn't know we were going to be poetic today. I'm just going to sound stupid over here compared to you, so thank you.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for.
We talked about it yesterday. I'm sorry that he's leaving, and I know it's always tough, especially when it's not close. It's over 1,000 miles away, and it is a sudden change because it was supposed to be a week from now, and it got moved up due to other circumstances. I don't know. That's always tough, so I'm sorry for you.
Yeah, it's going to be a big change because we've been best friends since college. We've known each other for almost 10 years, and we've lived together for like almost 7 of those. So it's weird. This last year was the first year we lived in different apartments because we were like, okay, it's time to have like our own space because we hadn't for so long. And then, yeah, he got a job and he's moving up there. But what sucks is his other job that he was leaving has been with the company for years and was kind of like the genesis of their marketing and social media and video department. He went in to give them notice, ample time, just, hey, this is when I have to leave, give you a heads up. I can help you train someone, all this stuff, right? And they came back and said, okay, you can leave today. And they essentially fired him. And I was like, wow, that's like a douche move.
I'm going to even take it a step further. That's a dick move. That is, douche can sometimes be funny. There's not a lot of humor in that one. And it just shows how petty. I'm sure he was somewhat devastated because you put the time in, you're trying to do the right thing, you get kind of backstabbed with it. I'm sure he was caught off guard because he did all the right things. He gave him plenty of notice. He told him what he was doing and all that stuff. You kind of get railroaded with it, which is, a great segue into what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to dive into these stories individually here and talk about lessons that we've learned, again, with this podcast. The whole idea is how to be successful with sucking less at it. And to a word you used a second ago, to be less of a douche.
Yeah, that was a big shock because, number one, it was uncomfortable because the person who had to tell him in HR is his friend. And they were just like, I'm so sorry. This is coming from the higher up. Like, I can't. It is what it is. But I mean, so that was uncomfortable on top of there was no thank you for anything. They were just like, okay, bye. You're gone. Okay. I was here for many years. I built your stuff, whatever. See you later.
Terrible.
Yeah.
But again, the good news for him is he's moving on to a better opportunity, which is great.
That's true.
I don't know. When this has happened to me in the past, I kind of want them to fail after I leave. Okay, you guys are going to be punks about this. Let's do it. Even though I try to set you up for success. And then the other side of me says, you know what? I built such good teams. I've done whatever. It's going to be fine. It'll provide even more value to show you what actually brought your organization. Maybe you can, eat your own words. But let's get started here. And let's talk. I'll let you go first today. Let's start with, he's moving on another job. He's doing his stuff and he left. How's he feeling now about the whole situation?
He's excited to move on and because he never really wanted to be in Florida either. It was sort of just kind of the timing of things because we ended up dating for many years and then we decided we were friends. And so he's pretty much family at this point between me and my family. But it's just weird because he's leaving. And even though my family is not his direct family, it's like he's still leaving family. And then it's all this change at one time. It's him going back up north. So he's having to acclimate to different weather. I mean, he's going to be doing a better job and it has more benefits and it's more in line with what he wants to do. But it's still, I think, a lot of change at one time. And I think it's that transitory phase that you get stuck in from getting to point A to point B. It's all the change, it's all the adapting, it's the having to problem solve, it's the packing, it's all these things. Like this morning, he was a little overwhelmed because last night he was trying to sleep and he's like, couldn't sleep. I feel anxious. And it's not because he's worried about moving or starting the job, but it's all the change at one time. And he's like, it's just a lot.
It is. I remember when I came out here, has nothing to do, just a little bit what we're talking about here, but like I started the job, they gave me 2 weeks to move from California to here. And I was like, what? And it was like, and the worst part was it's right before Christmas. So I had to tell like everyone, Kelly and I had a big, long discussion about it. And we're like, okay. But also my daughter was just born. So she's less than a year now old, getting ready to move out here. And I moved out for 6 months before they came out. So it was like this huge, I'm so excited I get to do this. We're going to this really cool opportunity. And it was that whole digestion of, holy crap, that kind of that excitement, that dopamine hit you get that you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be badass. And all of a sudden reality sinks in. And then the movers, and because like I didn't have to deal with the movers, right? Because she was there for 6 months. I drove out, which was horrendously long. It was just weird to be apart for that long. Thank God for FaceTime back then. But with him, I think it's interesting because it's so foreign. I know he's had relatives, stuff like that up in the area and everything, but it's going from one area. Florida alone is its own world, as we all know. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just like Texas. It has its own ecosystem. Every state, the big ones, California, Florida, Texas, New York, even Illinois, like they have these feels to them. Some don't. I'm sorry, some states. I hate to tell you this. Some of you are just boring. Not a bad thing. Some of you are just boring. And we need that sometimes. But like that's a ton of change. It was sped up and everything, and he'll do great. But I think one of the things that really helps when you go through these things is to not rush those experiences, because we want to get to the good stuff. But sometimes going through that suck part is really important, because then you don't have to go through it again later. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think really, no matter how exciting and how good the opportunities are and whatever, if you're making a move like moving cross country or he's moving cross the other way, he's going up. That's always stressful. I mean, I think it's like moving, getting married, and then there's like one other one are the 3 most stressful things ever that they've done on studies. It's just the amount of change that comes with it is so substantial that it takes a lot of time to sort of acclimate. And so I think it's more of that. Once he gets up there, he'll be all settled and it'll be fine. But it's just the process of it. And then he only had a month to get everything together. So by the time he had the job, and keep in mind, like during that time, you're going through the whole background checks and the drug tests and the whatever else stuff you have to do for like the onboarding process. Plus, he's going to the current job he had and having to not accidentally slip up before it's the time to say something. And then you're having to pack, and you're having to not only pack, but okay, this is going, this is leaving, this is getting sold, this is getting thrown out. It's a lot of just different pieces of it and moving pieces. And it kind of brings me back to, because you were talking about when you were moving cross country. So when I moved out to California, there was a time when I switched jobs, and the job I was at was not working out. The company was going under, and I was like, I gotta get into something else as quickly as possible. And so a friend introduced me to an executive producer. I got into a commercial studio, and I thought it was going to be great. I was excited. It was going to pay more and more consistently than what I was doing. And my first day I go in there, and there were 2 main bosses, and the one kind of just did his own thing. He was hardly ever in the office, and the other one kind of like ran everything. And he pulls me in, and he's like, all right, well, I just want to tell you, this is going to be a shit job. And I'm an asshole, just so you know, and this job pays like shit. I'm going to ask you to do all these things. You're going to work late, and you're not getting paid overtime. And I was like, well, that's a way to start that transition. Like, okay, so it's going to be like that. Needless to say, that job did not last long. And I actually have some really funny stories about working there. But sometimes even when you're excited about things and you go in and you're like, this would be great, something like that happens, you're like, oh, shit.
This is a great segue. So I'm sorry that happened to you, and it sucks. But again, at least you're laughing about it now, right? Because it's one of those moments you just get unexpected just feedback, and you're like, I can't wait to meet this, talk with this person. And my experience has been when someone admits that stuff, they're worse than what they're saying. So if they're saying they're assholes, they're so much further down that road. If anyone's wondering why some people start unions, it's because of bad people like that. Because there's no need for unions if you all treat each other like human beings. But if you're going to tell people, first of all, it's illegal. I'm going to pay you, but you're not going to get paid for overtime, all these things.
Especially in California, they're real big on that stuff.
Yeah, the labor laws are huge. Anyway, it's just sad that we have to even go down that road. But people like that, good luck to them, but time to move on. Let them screw themselves, because I'm sure he did it many times.
I don't think that company's open anymore, to be honest. I think it went under. But I mean, to put it in perspective of how bad he was, he really was an asshole. So he came into the office one day, and he was like an hour and a half late, and he was just raving about how pissed he was. How there was so much traffic, blah, blah, blah. He proceeds to tell everybody in the office that his day got worse, not only because there was traffic and the highways, it was like a standstill day, one of those times when there's like an accident and then nothing moves and you can't get off. So what he did is he had a Porsche, and I guess he drove up the what is that called? The shoulder of the lane at like 100 miles an hour.
Oh, Jesus.
And of course he got pulled over. And he's like, that motherfucker pulled me over. Da, da, da. He's like going on, right? On and on about it. And the poor little intern who was still in high school looks at him and goes, well, didn't you know you were going to get a ticket? Wrong thing to say. He turned around and he looks at him. He goes, son, let me tell you something. I drive a fucking Porsche. Do you think I care about a $600 fucking ticket? He just went on this whole thing about how my bicycle that I ride on the road is a $25,000 bicycle. I have a private jet, blah, blah, blah. Like, he just went off on this poor kid. And the kid was like about to cry. And I was just like, oh, just be quiet. Don't say anything to him.
Abort. They're all dead. Time to move on. I will tell you, I'm just going to tell your old boss here and to the former intern, it's a shame he had such a small dick, because nobody with any, if you've ever met anyone who's genuinely wealthy, talks like that. Like, no, like it's just a facade, and it's a huge insecurity, and you know immediately what a douchebag. So if you're one of those people, or you're one of those people that takes up 2 spaces when you park your car, we know we can't like you, and we know you're a douchebag. So don't try to fight it. That's just the rules of society. You're a douche. There's no getting around it. We just accept it. Own it. All right? We're accepting it for you. When I moved out here, I started with this company that my job was to get them ready to sell and merge. And that was my entire job. So I was getting it all ready for that. I did that, but they wanted to keep me on in the transition team. And I was like, this isn't, it's just, I didn't want to do that. It would have been a great job. It would have been awesome, but I want to try something different. So I got recruited to go to this other company. I loved it. It was going to be perfect. I actually took a pay cut. I knew I'd get they promised they'd get me back up, but it was actually a pay cut. Did all these things, concessions. My boss was actually great when I transitioned. My old boss, very supportive, but I joined this company. Day one, I gave up all this stuff. Like, it was an unbelievably great job because I wanted to do something different, have a bigger impact, and really, I love starting from the ground and building things up. My job was to come in and start this whole new continuous improvement culture and team there. So it was basically automating things, process improvement across this gigantic organization that was coast to coast. And I was really excited. They had nothing like this in there. I show up, I think I started on a Tuesday, if I remember right. My boss wasn't there. So I show up and he's not there. And I'm like, this is weird. I don't know anyone in this organization. I mean, everything's foreign to me. They're super nice. They sit me down. Some of the team members that are going to work for me come over and they introduce themselves, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a computer. I have nothing, right? And I have to spend a full day there. So I'm just going around introducing myself. Everyone's really friendly. Day's over. I come home and I'm like, man, this was a really weird first day. Second day, I go in and the guy that hired me shows up and he's like, hey, I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday. I just want to talk to you about something. He pulls me in and goes, I just want to let you know I quit yesterday. I'm here to get my stuff and I'm leaving right now. And I'm like, what? The guy that started this. And needless to say, he was the one who started this team. So without him, no one supported this team. So all of a sudden, I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? He's like, listen, you're going to be fine. Everything's great. I'm like, what? I gave up everything to be here. I can't go back. They've already hired someone. Like, what the heck am I going to do? I finally go talk to the CEO. She's like, yeah, I knew we filled that role. I didn't know that was you, but can you sell me on why it's important?
Oh, no, that's never good.
It's never, no. And it just shows you.
That's like such a red flag. It always ends in something terribly bad.
Yes. And it should be also, as a leader, what it told me was she's not communicating or connecting with her people at all, because you should know these kind of things, especially if you're signing off on them, because everything has to be signed off. Anyways, she's like, yeah, I talked to her for like 2 hours. She's like, this really sounds interesting. Can you work in New York for a while? What? So I start this job because the main reason I was also leaving was I didn't want to travel all the time. I had 3 kids. Like, I wanted to be with the family. For the next year and a half, I was commuting back and forth to New York every week.
That's a lot.
It was the craziest, weirdest, most horrible transition I've ever had. It was just, to me, a great example. I was going to tell a different story in terms of bad ones, but since we're talking travel today, this one in particular was just one of those where I thought everything was taken care of. It wasn't. I thought I had supportive culture. I didn't. And the worst part was, after he left, almost the entire team that reported to him left. He took him to go to a competitor. So I was like the lone man standing. All these other people are vying for positions because he left, so they want to move up. It was the most insane thing. It ended up working out very well for me. Actually ended up becoming very lucrative for me, but it was just one of those weird, what the hell am I doing? I actually came home and I cried. I go, I think I just made the biggest mistake of my life. And Kelly's like, what happened? And I told her, she's like, that didn't happen. I'm like, it happened. And she's like, it sounds so fake, unreal when you hear it and you're living it. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. Anyways, it was just one of those experiences where I'm really protective of that now. Whenever I go in, if I'm doing corporate gigs or whatever, you're going to be here. I have this like once bitten, twice shy, like, I don't know, just weird experience here where every time I'm like, you're going to be here, right? Like all these things to check the box because I'm so paranoid about that experience. If you are joining a company or you are leaving a company or you are hiring your replacement or in a department that you are trying to create, don't set the person up for failure. Do all the right stuff to set them up for success and then move on with your stuff. That's absolutely the right thing to do. But he knew for months that he was going to do this. He literally had me hired the day he quit. So anyway, it was the craziest weird. Oh, the other thing, sorry, real quick, that happened was, so this was the final kind of straw. This is what broke me. Group, which is a huge management. Basically, they are, if you've ever seen Wall Street, they're like Gordon Gekko or Carl Icahn or any of these people out there that go in, take a bunch of shares and basically bleed the company for everything it's worth. They sell everything and they do everything. So this company was very distressed, but it was the only company in the country, it's the largest one that did what it did. So they saw blood in the water and they went in and bought 30% of the company. And so literally within, I had my boss quit, I had all this tumultuous thing. Then the next week, announces that they're going to take over the company and they have no faith in the board. So they fire the entire board. They go executive by executive. I was like fourth on their list of interviews. It was the most terrifying. I'm like, I don't even know. Like, and the good news was they were very nice. They started laughing. They're like, what happened to you? And I was like, listen, and they looked through my record because I've worked with a few of them before. They're like, yeah, don't worry, you're going to be fine. We need people like this. We don't want the old school way of thinking. And so that was really reassuring. But again, they were there for a year and a half. Every 3 weeks you go in and you had to basically pitch why you were important to the company. It was the most insane thing ever.
That's terrible. So sorry that happened to you.
Sorry, I forgot to tell you about that. And me too. But if I now look at, like, I'll pay attention to the news and I'll be like, anytime corporate raider, whatever, buys something, I'm like, is always like, oh, you poor bastards. Yes. The good news was they ended up leaving the company. And the funny part was when I joined, you get stock benefits and they didn't vest for like 3 years or something like that. But I joined and the stock was at $12 or something. When it came in, it went to $3. So I'm like, this stock is not going anywhere. When I left, it was 48.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it was the most I'd ever made on any stock. I mean, that's like what is that? 400% return. Anyway, it was insane. They did do the right thing there. They don't always, but it did have a happy ending is what I'm saying.
Wow. That's crazy. That brings me actually to a completely different story I forgot about. I wasn't going to talk about today, but I think it's relevant. So I was working at one company and I was their main trainer and for everybody in that particular department. And I also ran all of their like event planning and parties and things like that. I decided I was going to leave because the work environment was really toxic. My boss and I got along fine, but nobody else got along with her. She was very hard on everyone. And she was one of those people that she'll tell you one thing and then suddenly that will be wrong the next day. It was one of those types of situations, which, as annoying as that is, I know how to handle people like that. So for me, it was never really an issue, but it was very combative for a lot of people. So anyway, there was a new company that was really big that was opening up, and they were somewhat scouting and trying to steal other places' people, which happens when something that big moves and opens. And I was already in a position where I was going to leave anyways, this particular company. And this boss was notorious for, if you said you were leaving, you were not getting 2 weeks. You were not like, she's done with you. So I had geared myself up for that. And I was like, all right, well, because I still try to give notice even in those situations, just because I've been on the other end of that where I've had people leave me and it's like, oh, fuck. So I try to still give notice even in those situations. So I pull her aside and I tell her what's going on. I hand her my letter, whatever. And she goes, I really need you to stay an extra week plus the 2 weeks. And I was like, what? And she goes, I'll pay you 3 times what you're making now. And I was like, damn, okay.
If you make me, I'll do it. Yes.
Oh gosh, let me see if I can figure that one out. So I ended up staying and everyone's like looking at me and they're like, I thought you put in your notice. I was like, I did. And they're like, you're still here? But anyway, so that ended up working well. But what didn't work well was when I transitioned to this other company. They made all these promises. And this was like This is a big company, so international type thing. So everybody who went in really thought they were going to hold their promises. I was supposed to be making a salary on top of bonuses, on top of tips, on top of other things, depending on what we were doing for the event planning.
Okay.
They were going to have 2 different sections that they wanted me to work in, one that had more to do with the events, the other that was more one-on-one.
Okay.
Whatever, that was fine. I get there. And the first thing was they had multiple people from different departments that have nothing to do with each other at all in the same training group. That was the first problem. The second problem is they told everybody the first day, oh, we're going to be doing 2 weeks of training because we're just opening here, which is kind of expected. What they didn't tell you is they expected you to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning until like 6 o'clock in the afternoon.
Ooh.
And they were not going to be paying people. And I said, oh, hell no. I'm sorry. I'm at a point in my career where I have to sit in a training, especially stuff I already know. You're paying me to sit there. And so, and not to be an asshole, but that's just, you're not wasting my time like that. I'm sorry. And so I went to the manager and I said, listen, I understand you guys are just opening whatever, but this is kind of ridiculous. And I don't know about everyone else, but I'm not doing this. You have to pay me to sit here. If you want me to go through this training, I'm already going to be doing all these things for you. That's not going to fly. They said, okay. They were like, we're going to pay minimum wage for everyone to sit there. And I was like, well, that sucks still, but okay, whatever, fine. It was a win for me because I was like, I'm not sitting here for 2 weeks, not getting paid anything. So that moves forward. Then all of a sudden, they have all the managers in there. They're training the managers at the same time as they're training everybody else. That was another problem. And so nobody knows how to train at all, clearly.
Of course.
Nobody knows what to do. They're sitting up there doing PowerPoints for things that you have to physically know how to hold things or do things with your hands. And I was like, okay. So at this point, I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, this is a shit show. And this was not what I was expecting. So then I get pulled aside again because everybody's coming and asking me how to do things because I was the trainer at the last place and everybody knows that. And I said, listen, I don't mind training your people. I'm happy to do it, but you're going to pay me to train your people. I got paid to do it at my other job. It's a skill. It's a trade. Like, this is not, no, I'm not doing it for free.
Yeah.
So that was the next thing. And they were like, I don't want to do that. And I said, okay, well, then I'm not going to be participating in these things because I'm going to get stuck training people. That's what's going to happen. That's not going to happen. That's exactly what started to happen. And then they got mad at me and they're like, you're being unteam-like. I said, listen, we had this conversation. I said, I trained people at my last job. And to put it in perspective for you, I said, I'm not trying to be an asshole, but in the sales department that I did at my last job, last year alone, which I was only there for like 7 months at this point in time, I had made the company over $500,000. So I said, listen, I'm not playing around here. I can go back to my other job. She's happy to take me because I'm that resourceful and useful and valuable to them. And I said, I'm not doing this for free. And so anyway, they got all pissed off about that. And so the head of whatever, like the next level person, comes and he drives over in his little golf cart and he's on his big high horse and he's like, I hear you're giving my manager a problem. And I said, I'm not giving anyone a problem. The problem is that you guys don't know how to train because you have everybody. And at the same time, you have people from different departments that aren't even handling any of this stuff. People who are underage, who you're trying to teach like alcohol things, who can't serve alcohol.
Yeah,
like,
makes sense.
What are you guys doing? I said, everyone's getting frustrated and they're getting ready to leave. You guys are going to have a mutiny. Everyone's going to up and walk out. So I'm trying to help you guys and talk to your manager and tell you guys what the issue is. And I'm sorry if that comes across as combative, but like, this is a little ridiculous. You guys didn't even want to pay anybody for 2 weeks to have them sit there as if they're working full time. And so then he starts giving me all this crap and I like reiterated that I can go back to my other job. And I said, listen, either you pay me or I don't come to the training. I don't care how you want to do it, but I'm not doing it like this. And he said, I don't think this is going to work out. I said, you know what? I guess it's not. And so we went over to HR and we did all the paperwork and I was out and he's like, maybe I'll call you when we're a little further along. I said, don't bother. I have no interest anymore. Thank you for your time. And that was the end of that. I was done. I was like, nope. I am not working for a company like this. And that's one thing too, when you end up in a company where the transitory period of that is so bad and you see that the management's falling apart, the HR department didn't know what was even going on half the time. Like nobody was communicating with each other. It was just a disaster. And one of my friends at the time who had transitioned with me, she stayed over there and she was supposed to be making over $100,000 a year. She got stuck with a job where she was making 45. And I went,
Oh,
why did you stay? And she's like, I don't know. I just didn't know what to do. I'm like, you have to advocate for yourself in those situations because otherwise people just walk all over you.
absolutely. But I mean, the flip side of that is what a shitty organization. Like it's insane to me that still occurs. Like I know it shouldn't surprise me, but it always does. Wow. Well, I mean, it sounds like you did all the right things and I'm proud of you for, standing up for yourself and doing what's right. And I'm sure you can probably inspire quite a few other people to be like, wow, and that,
Yeah, I think that's what they were worried about.
That's the whole idea.
I was like, this is ridiculous. I can get pretty vocal sometimes about that stuff. Sometimes also I know myself and it can come across a little harsher than maybe it should. But yeah, I'm not a quiet person when it comes to stuff like that. So when I get pushed to a certain extent, I'll let certain things slide. But after a certain point, I'm like, okay, it's time to draw the line here. But that was such a horrible situation. And they have such bad reviews. They've now been open for a couple years and everyone just like shits on them because they never have anything together. And actually my sister's graduation was over there and they couldn't even get the sound equipment to work. And I was like, well, this is just par for the course for you guys. Like this is expected.
That's embarrassing. Again, I'm blown away. Like they're still open. Again, it shows you that people don't learn their lesson. Anyways, it can't be.
Well, the only reason I think they're still open is because they're such a huge company with so much money. I mean, the owner is like a billionaire or something. Like they just toss money at it. And part of it is they opened such a huge facility with multiple different events and buildings and everything all at once, and they didn't have anybody to run it. So they brought in all these people. When you're in a town like Ocala, where there's not big corporate America, you're not getting the same tier of leadership that you're hiring, I think, as they were expecting. And because there are other ones in like a big city or whatever. And so you have to go through more training usually to teach people those things. And they just thought everyone was going to be self-sustaining here. And I think that was their first problem, on top of, instead of gradually building, they just did everything at once. And so it was a shit show. And they still, I think it's been like 2 years, 3 years, they still don't have their shit together.
Well, good luck to them, kind of. And I mean, what a great story. So I'll lead in with something funny and then, a success story. So when I was in LA, young, I don't know, early 20s, a buddy of mine got a gig to be the valet for the Oscars. He's like, hey, they're looking for people. Do you want to be one? I'm like, course, like who wouldn't? At 20 something, like, why not? Like, you get to drive beautiful cars, you get to meet cool people. Absolutely. And the tips are insane.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of those pay a lot.
Yeah, actually, I think the pay itself was like something ridiculous, like a waiter, like $2 an hour. I mean, something was super low, but yeah, with tips, woo, it was a good night. But the best part was you go to this training and there's, I don't know, probably 30 people, maybe 40. All of us are in the entertainment industry in some regard, whatever level. And so a lot of them are actors. It's so funny because the very first thing the guy comes out and says, he's this I don't know if he's New York, New Jersey, but he has this really heavy accent and just basically a no bullshit approach. He's like, look, don't scratch the cars and don't fuck in the cars.
I didn't realize the second one would be a problem, but okay.
That's my point. So he tells this story. I'm just looking at him like, he's kidding, right? Like, no, he says this every year. And he says, just wait for it. I'm like, okay. Anyways, he gets up and he tells the story. He's like, yeah, 2 years ago, this couple, basically, they were going through a divorce. I don't know who it was, but it was obviously, I think it was a producer, no one that most people would know outside the industry. And so his wife took one of the valets and did it in their car to get back at her husband.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently not apparently, I mean, I would throw a fit too. But anyways, I'm like, how messed up is your world that this happens? And so they actually have a policy that you have to sign off on not to have sex in the cars. And to this day, like, it just made me think about what you just went through. Like, oh, again, it would never have occurred to me. That was the thing. Like, it just didn't occur to me. And I'm just like, well, now I want to know all about it. The worst part isn't they tell you not to do it. So now you want to know all about it. Who was it? When did it happen? You want to know all those details.
How did they not get caught? Yeah.
Exactly. Was it in front of other people? Was it in the yard? Well, where was it? Anyways, lots of questions. But anyways, I just thought that was just a fun, like, again, orientation can go all over the map. Don't have any expectations other than it's going to take it longer than you think. And there will be something weird said, and try not to giggle at it. Because every company has some story. They've got some policy. Somebody did something to create that policy. Mm-hmm. Just realize that's where it comes from. So my happier story was when I was probably like 32, whatever. I got transferred to a new program, and it was kind of like yours, actually. I was kind of excited to hear what you were saying, because it's very similar, where this woman was notoriously like just a battle axe. Like, she would come in and literally just slice and dice. And so she was recruiting, and she had her entire team together, but was missing the actual proposal manager. And she'd interviewed, I don't think I'm exaggerating, like 50 people. And she'd either worked with them in the past or didn't like them. And she's like, I need new blood. So my manager, I still don't know why he did it, but he was like, you should go try for this. You have nothing to lose. I'm like, I'd heard nothing good. I'm terrified to meet this woman, and she's notoriously late. And anyway, so I'm like, all right, why not? I'll swing for the fences. So we sit down, and she looks at me, and she's probably a half hour late. So I'm already really annoyed. And it's one of those rooms with like super long tables, because it's a Black program. So anyways, like, you have to have big conference rooms where people can meet, and then everyone goes off to their own area. So anyways, this huge conference room, and I'm just sitting there by myself, and there's cameras all over because they monitor you very closely. So I'm like, I can't do anything. You can't have a phone. So I'm just sitting in a room for a half hour. So I'm already annoyed. She walks in, and she's like, hey, Jason. And I'm like looking around. Jason, who the hell's Jason? And I look at her, I'm like, is Jason joining us? And she goes, are you not Jason? And I'm like, I'm Justin. And she goes, pulls out my resume. She's like, oh, sorry. And then my glasses on. Hey, Justin, how are you? And she starts giggling, and she goes, just get used to that shit. I do it all the time. I don't really know people's names. I'm like, well, it's kind of a nice thing to know, people's names. Anyways, she starts just talking to me. She's like, I've had a hell of a day. And I'm like, well, tell me about it. And literally it devolved from this 2-hour conversation. And she finally looks at her, like, she had it's like a BlackBerry thing, but it's like an old school beeper, basically, that like beeps when you need to go somewhere, because you can't communicate in those rooms. So anyways, she had this like little plaque thing, and it buzzed, and she goes, oh my God. And she was like really late for this meeting. And she goes, listen, you seem very interesting, well-traveled, and like you got a good head on your shoulders. Don't fuck it up. And I was like, what? So I just left. Like, she just left. I left and went back. My manager's like, what did you do? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, she just hired you. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
I was like, she did? That's what that meant? And he's like, oh yeah. I started, that was like on a Thursday. I started the next day. She like literally, I was by her side the entire time. And it was one of the most fun experiences, because for whatever reason, she loved me. I don't know why. I didn't do anything special. I didn't kiss her ass. Like, I was whatever. But the funny part was, like, she'd take me to meetings. I remember we were in Congress, and someone said something so dumb, like, do you really need to be doing that? Some sort of program thing. Like, do you need this sort of engineer? And she's like, do you want the fucker to fly? Do you want the fucker to fly? Justin, do you want the fucker to fly? Just like, I looked at her, I'm like, yeah, I want that fucker to fly. And everyone starts laughing. And it wasn't meant to be funny. She's really serious. But I'm just like, so I really thank her, because she really gave me a different perspective that I've never gotten anywhere else. She saw something in me. She immediately made me her right hand. I didn't know her. Like, I didn't know any of her team. And of course, like, the best part is, half of her team is really upset over this, because they're all kind of like old school. They've all worked together forever. Who's this young punk kid coming in? And eventually I won most of them over. Can never win everyone, but I did most. She was just so funny. She's like, listen to what this fucker says. And I'm just like, drop the F-bomb everywhere. Like, we would be in these meetings, just drop it everywhere. And anyways, the point of it was fun to have someone believe in you, and having a really good experience like that, but also have someone that valued your opinion and didn't know me. She would, again, in Congress, do you want this fucker to fly? Well, look, I mean, this is in Congress. I'm just like, yeah, I want this fucker to fly. It's in a congressional record somewhere. Like, that is out there that I said that, because everything's recorded there. So anyways, if you are in a position like that, I would always say, take a chance. It can never hurt. And if you are one of the people that's hiring, the impact you can have on someone's life, I think, is understated. Take it with a high level of respect and a high level of responsibility, that when you get someone on your team, you need to do something for them. And whether you mean to be their unbelievable mentor. Just treat him like a human being, give him that opportunity. And it's always, for me, it's always paid off. And again, in that one instance really changed the way I treat and act with people, because it showed me a very different, I don't know, someone that was really powerful, that had a lot of sway and didn't give a shit, and yet really reached out. So it was cool.
That's awesome. That's a good story.
Thanks. It was so funny because so she was one of the first in the team to get a Prius. So this is, and everybody was teasing her. They're like, what kind of green shit is that? And she goes, the green shit that's going to save the planet. So shut the fuck up.
I like this woman.
I do too. And she was so, oh my God. I mean, everyone has a boss you can laugh about, but I worked with her for probably about 9 months, something like that, solidly, like by her side. I worked with her for a year and a half, but like we branched out once we got the program. It was just so funny being by her side all the time, because she'd eat lunch and she'd order stuff in and be like, what are you eating today, Justin? I'm like, well, I brought lunch. She goes, what'd you bring? And I'd tell her and she'd be like, oh, that's bullshit. What do you want? I'm like, well, I kind of wanted to eat this. Like, it sounded good to me. She's like, no, that's just bullshit. Like none of that rabbit shit. But what do you really want to eat? You want a burger? You want a burger? I'm like, I don't want a burger. She's like, I got you a burger. I'm like, all right, let's have a burger. And of course, I'd only eat half of it. And she'd be like, why didn't you eat your burger? I'm like, because I don't want a burger. She's like, why didn't you tell me you didn't want a burger? I'm like, what do you mean? And she didn't get mad over it. She's like, next time I say eat a burger, tell me you don't want one. I'm like, okay, can be the same thing next day.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh.
So, I think that's one of those things that we also forget about work. You're supposed to laugh. You're supposed to have fun. And when you go to events like trainings, like you were talking about, when they're stale and they're boring and they're hard and they are stupid. I've never been to a good corporate training where you walk away going, that was amazing. And anyone that tells you they have, I'm going to go back to the D word. They're douchebags. It doesn't exist. It's too PC. It's too, I don't know what the right word is, too sanitized, too sterilized. Like it's not real. The constant challenge everyone is trying to do out there is make it fun, make it enjoyable, and don't waste people's time. I think that's just a good lesson overall.
I agree. And there's always those ones that you go to the corporate training sessions and you're watching the videos from like, I don't know, the 70s. You know what I'm talking about? And it's like,
of course,
this is 2023. Like you guys haven't in the last couple decades thought maybe, I don't know, I should reshoot this.
They're still smoking in it. Yes.
Yeah, they're still smoking in it. There's still really dumb things in there that are not relevant anymore. And you're just like,
welcome. We have this new invention called the typewriter. What?
they're talking about, you shouldn't be on your phone or whatever. And they got like the flip phones with the little buttons and beepers. It's like nobody uses those anymore. It's the same thing, whatever.
I don't know. We mentioned those states that are kind of boring. I bet some people in those boring states, you still use that stuff. And I'm not naming any particular state. You know which ones are boring.
But definitely, there's a movement where a lot of the younger generations are going back to flip phones and things because smartphones are too in your face. And I was talking to Rob about this the other day, my best friend who's leaving, because he was talking about it. I was like, what? And he's like, no, it's a whole thing. I was like, no, it's not. And he's like, yes, it is. And he pulls up the articles. I'm like, the hell?
Where do they get it? Did somebody manufacture? Are these old? Are they actually using like old technology? I've never even heard of this.
Well, I don't know if they're using like the old vintage ones, but they do still have those types of phones, but I thought they were like track phones. Like you have to buy the minutes and stuff for them still. I don't know how it works, but I was like, that's got to be so annoying because I think people forget back in the day when you were texting, you didn't have all the individual buttons. So you're sitting there clicking the same button like 4 times to get to H.
I forgot about that. Yes. Like,
hold on. Okay, hold on. Just hit this 6 times. Damn it.
I'm going to start giggling about this all day. I completely forgot about that. Like X, Y, and Z. There's like 3 in the bottom. Not that you use those letters a lot, but I remember you're absolutely right. Yes. And then if you go past it, you're like, God damn it. Yes.
We were telling a story at my sister's graduation the other day, and the kid's like, I don't remember what the story was, but my mom was telling it. The kid's like, well, why didn't you just call him? My mom goes, oh, we didn't have cell phones back then. She was like, why didn't I just call them? Like, because you forget, because we've had it for so long now. It's just, assimilated into our culture. But I mean, when I was growing up, I didn't have a phone until I was, I think, a senior in high school. So, I mean, we didn't have phones. We didn't have any of that stuff back then.
The thing I remember most was getting an email address. Like I'm old enough to be get like a first email address, like on AOL. And I remember my mom hired someone to come to our house and set up AOL on our computer. And I'm looking back and I'm just like giggling. I mean, I remember her paying someone and like, what do you want your name to be? And I'm like, I don't know, like Big Tits McGee. I don't know. Like, what can I do? Like, he's like, well, it should signify who you are. And so I don't remember what it was originally, but my mom was like, that's inappropriate. Pick something else. So it was something dumb at the end of the day. But then my mom and dad both picked these like really weird ones that were just as lame. And I still don't even know what they meant. It was just weird to me. So I just remember the guy showing up at the house. I'm like, Mom, I'll set it up for you because you had discs back then that you put in your computer and it had like pre-programmed minutes on it. The guy puts the disc in and my mom's like, well, how many minutes do I have? And he goes, well, it starts when it connects. And it took 10 minutes to connect back then, like all that stuff. And it was just so funny. We got on and she's like super excited, but then she wouldn't let us use it because our minutes were so tight. Anyways, it was just, those are the memories I have. So even before cell phones, that's like the first one that I'm just like, you guys have no idea.
That is funny. Yeah, mine was something stupid like dragonfly and some numbers.
I could see that. Mine was a shark thing, but I just don't remember what it was. It was because I love sharks. It was shark something. I don't know. It's probably something stupid like Shark 69 and giggling, like something like that. I'm like 14, like, yeah, I'm a badass. My mom's like, oh, Jesus, Justin, like, it's so stupid. So if anyone has that address out there and you're listening, I wouldn't keep that one. That's not a good one. Well, Blake, I got to tell you, this was another fantastic episode, and please let us know what your experiences have been, because it's fun to share these stories, and hopefully you can relate to all these, because even like the catering one for the events one that you did, it just brings back so many memories of just having bosses like that, where you show up for trainings like that. So I've never been in that position, but again, it's so relatable and fun. So I hope you all enjoy this, and please let us know what your stories are, because I think we'd love to hear them.
Oh, absolutely. We would love to hear them, all the good ones and the bad ones, because especially I think it's useful too when you're going through these different transitions, because everyone's different. Every single one that you go through, every single like point A to point B and everything in between. And I mean, in just even different aspects of your life, whether it's just moving because you want to move to California like I did when I got out of college, or it's moving because you have a job, or you're moving houses because you had kids. I mean, there's so many different aspects of it. And I feel like there's so many different lessons to be learned as well.
100%. And I think the most important lesson of today is when you're about to cry, laugh. And stand up for yourself, right? Not enough people stand up for yourself. And I thought the way you did it was just like, fine, I've hit my end. You hit that and you were like, and you stood true to your roots and who you are. And that's so badass, because so many people hit that and go, well, okay, maybe that's not where I should. Let me just go a little further. And then you just go down a path that just leads to misery. So I think that was really wise. And for all of you out there, please listen to that. That piece of advice is probably the most important of today's.
Well, I will say, to quote Colleen Hoover for a second, there was a book that I read and it was talking about boundaries and how when you're dealing with situations like that, if you keep allowing like, oh, we'll just go a little bit further, it'll fix itself or it'll correct itself somehow. Let's see, how did she word it? It was something like your bandwidth for that starts getting lost, and your boundaries of like what you can and can't handle, or what you're willing to put up with and not put up with, starts slowly crumbling, because you start losing the lines of where things should and shouldn't end. And so she was saying that essentially once you get to a certain point, there's no fixing it. Like there's only so much energy you should put into it before you're like, okay, we've got to cut our losses here.
Awesome. Well, I can't top that. So Blake, thank you. To our audience, thank you. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe. Don't be a douche. Subscribe.
Absolutely. Definitely subscribe. Well, Justin, as they say, all good things must come to an end.
Alas, they must. However, this isn't the end, because next week, same time, same channel, we drop another episode.
So get excited, because we're going to be diving deeper into all the topics of the not so subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in the pursuit of it. So join the conversation below, and don't forget to subscribe.